Great to talk to you, mate.
You too. Thank you for having me.
Well, first of all, thank you because personally, you've given me some really great feedback on my review with the film and also the interview with Rachele, your co-star. So thanks, mate. It means a lot.
Of course, yeah, pleasure, pleasure. I'm so pleased you enjoyed the movie. So, yeah.
Well, tell me, I'll start with that film. How did you get the role? Henry Bouquet. I mean, you do some pretty big monologues in there and you make quite an impression. How did the script come across your desk?
So I got an audition for the movie through my agent, and I was in London at the time, and it was just actually when we were all coming out of lockdown, so not long after, maybe like a month or two after we'd come out of lockdown. Um,
Sure.
and initially, I read for a different character, a supporting role. And sent that off. And I really liked the script. Sent it off, and obviously you always hope, like when you really like something, you're going to hear back. And then it wasn't for another month or so, maybe a few weeks, that I then heard back that they wanted me to read for the lead role of Colonel Bouquet, which
Yeah.
is exciting. So then I taped for that, and then they gave me a call back for the lead, and it was all done over Zoom. So I was like in my bedroom in London doing the audition for Dave and Larry and the casting director and all of that, which is obviously a very surreal experience. I had to do some of
Oh,
those big
yeah.
movies while in my bedroom in London. And then found out maybe a week or two later that I booked that role. And then it was another month, I think, before I was flown out to start, training and then the shoot. So yeah.
Well, I'm stoked you got it, mate. I think that the lesson in history isn't very well known. I mean, I certainly didn't know much about the battle. And is that something you sort of had to look up and check out after you got the role, or was it before you went for the audition?
Yeah, so it was definitely something I had to do research on. I didn't get the full script until I was asked to for the callback for the lead, and then I
Yeah.
read the script, and then I probably like in the beginning had done some googling and had a brief knowledge, like look up and some knowledge about it, but the script is really detailed and very historically accurate. So there was so much already to learn just from the text there. And then but
Yeah.
the real proper research started after I got cast. And then that's when I did a real deep dive into it. And Charlie, the writer, I asked him for any recommendations on books, and he gave me a bunch of recommendations, ordered all of those books, went through them, highlighted, compared it to what was happening in the script. So yeah, I knew nothing about this period of time or this particular
No.
battle before I got cast. So it was also just a fascinating period of time to learn about.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I really enjoyed it, and I've seen it twice, and I knew nothing about that time of history. You stepping into the role, though, it's interesting because your soldiers are a mixed bag from
Yes.
people around the world. So that would have helped you being a British actor and then having even Scottish Highlanders as part
Yeah.
of the troop. Did that sort of help as well because you maybe Bouquet was a bit of an outsider the character himself?
Yeah, well, that's how I perceived him, as someone who, well, the way I saw him was someone as this sort of like calm center that
Yeah.
everyone would gravitate towards. And so it was helpful having these other very different characters to him, which allowed me to sort of ground myself a bit more in I'm different to all of them. And while we have a camaraderie, I'm not quite the same. I'm definitely, I think my character is more analytical, more of a thinker.
Mm.
Uh, and that's really what the real Bouquet was famous for. But yeah, once we got onto set and everyone was in their costumes and everyone was doing their performances, it just helped me get into that more uh, feeling, the feeling of really being a colonel, that I'm leading these people. And while I want them to respect me, I don't need to necessarily work hard to get that respect.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
maybe if I was surrounded by people who were all very similar to me and wearing what I was wearing, then it would have been a different challenge to sort of you know, ground myself in that environment, I guess. But yeah.
Well, oh yeah, you've touched on it already, but I was going to ask you about the costumes. There, it's an independent film, right? So I couldn't believe how detailed, and I've said this to Rachele and your directors, that what they got was just so detailed and fabulously genuine on screen. Stepping into that costume, it would have changed everything for you. I'm assuming, just being part of it and looking at yourself.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just the feel of the clothes, you know, they feel very
Yeah,
different to, you know, what I would usually wear. And yeah, absolutely. You know, I did the wardrobe fitting and there were so many different, you know, outfits to try on. And, you know,
yeah,
straight away I was like, oh, okay, now it's like adding another layer, that sort of final layer onto building the character where it just makes you feel physically more aligned with how he may have felt back then with what he's wearing. And yeah, so it was instrumental, and the wardrobe was so good and so authentic that
yeah.
yeah, it was a huge help in building
What
the
about
character.
locations? Any dramas? Did you get any injuries with horses or anything like that?
No,
No?
no. I personally did not get injured on the
Good,
horse.
good.
I did have a couple of scary moments where, like,
Right.
uh, at one point there was a scene where someone had to like charge up to me, deliver a line of dialogue. They charge off, and then I say something, and I'm supposed to charge after them. And the first time I did it, the horse didn't want to go, and then afterwards. I could just sense, I could pick up that the horse was something was up. It was like stomping its foot. I just
Right.
felt like it was really raring to go. Then it did when we did it again. The
Um,
guy came up, delivered his line of dialogue. He bolted, and then my horse bolted, and then I had to like pull him back to stop him from bolting, and
yeah.
then he like tried to butt me off, and I did actually start falling off the horse. Thankfully, they were there to catch me, the horse wrangler and his assistant and stuff. But after that, I had to take a little break because I was like, "There's something up. The horse is not feeling good right now." So I think maybe we should take a little minute because if I nearly fell off then, I probably will fall off this third take. So yeah, I mean, you know, when you're working with animals and you know
Mm,
big horses like that, it can be a little intimidating. But you do, I mean, the one thing they always tell you is to, if you relax, the horse will also relax. But sometimes
right.
that's easier said than done, particularly when you're doing a scene where your adrenaline's meant to be high, you know. So yeah.
Yeah. Have you had a history with working with horses or animals in the past? So it was something you were used to, or was it a first?
I when I was younger, I definitely had experience riding horses and doing all of that.
Mm,
There is in London, you can go and do that. I hadn't done it in a while, and I had never ridden a horse on camera. And
right.
so that they I was out in Georgia like a couple of weeks before we started filming, and mainly for the training with the horse, which I picked up on pretty quickly. But then it is a totally different ballgame when you're trying to do it in front of a camera. So, but it was fantastic and such a learning experience. And now it is something that I can say I have done and can do. So, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Tick that one off. That's great.
yeah,
Might
yeah,
might help with a future role.
exactly, exactly right. Yeah.
Technique. What is your acting technique on set? Is it different to how you might be doing an audition to what you would do on set? How do you warm yourself up? How do you remember the lines? Have you got a special way about you? And because you do a few monologues in this.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, what I like to do on set is basically do all of the preparation leading up to filming, the research, going through, you know, breaking down the character, the scenes. And then when it comes time to actually being on set, I like to it's important, I think, to throw all of that work away and just be in the moment, in the
Right.
scene with the
Yeah.
actors. Because otherwise, I think it can start looking like you're working, you know, and you don't want it to.
You don't want that.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but when I am on set, one thing I never do is bring my mobile phone to set. I leave it in my trailer because otherwise I just feel like everyone's so addicted to your phone. We're also addicted to our phones that I'd just be like scrolling. And I like to take that time on set because there's a lot of time in between takes where you're sitting and waiting. And I just like to take that time to like sit and meditate over the scene,
Okay.
keep composed, keep my energy, like rest, so my energy can be up for when they say action.
Yeah.
And sort of daydream a little bit about, what's going on with the character in this moment, what's happening in the scene, and use that as well as a little bit of just a pre-action time of preparation, basically. And if it was one of the big monologues that I had, you would find me like pacing around somewhere, going over and over it, so that when it came time to shooting, I wasn't going to be constantly having to go again, go again. So I just wanted to feel like
Yeah.
those long speeches that I had it down and I could just focus on being in the moment of the scene. So yeah.
There's Native American plot line, storyline to this historical event. That's an important part of the movie. Did you also research that as part of the event, the role you're playing?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in all of the books I had, it went, deep into all of that. And yeah, so it was
Yep.
just a real eye opener. And of course, it's a very delicate subject
Sure.
matter.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I certainly didn't want people to think that the film is sort of pro-colonialism in any way.
No.
And it was really just showing a time period and trying to like show what it would have been like at that time and the attitudes of that time, which, of course, would be very different in
Of course. Yeah.
1763 to 2024. So in order to do it justice, we had to show what are the attitudes of these people at that time. And of course, learning all about Pontiac's war and
Yeah.
all of that was just fascinating. So, yeah.
The movie's called Love, Courage. So that means to me, people are going to expect romance. Now, having seen it, your chemistry with Rachele is quite good. I think it's believable. You make a great couple. How she spoke highly of you. I mean, not trying to preempt anything, but how was she as a co-star? Had you worked with before? When do you remember meeting her for the first time?
Yes, so we had never met until we got out to Georgia, and she came out early as well, so that we could have time together and rehearse our scenes. And I remember we met in a coffee shop in the small town center in Covington where we were shooting.
Yep.
And immediately just hit it off. It is always a bit awkward when you're meeting someone for the first time and you're like, oh, we've got to do these really, romantic, intimate scenes together. But then that was
Sure.
good as
Yeah.
well, because I think when they first see each other again, their first meeting in the film, it is a little bit stilted and a little bit awkward because there's a lot of built up feelings that they don't want to show straight away, and particularly in the time period. They're not going to be all over each other like some people might be today.
Yeah.
But then once we really got to know each other in that 2 weeks, we just had such a blast together, and we really got along really well and had a real laugh. Like, we definitely have the same sense of humor, which I think to have that connection of humor
Yeah.
with someone is such a huge thing, I think, in creating that chemistry. And having that spark between you. And we wanted to bring some of that as the relationship developed to the characters in those moments. But yeah, she was just a dream to work with and so much fun. And I hope we're still good friends now, and I hope that we get to do something together again at some
Yeah,
point.
I hope so. That the further adventures of Bouquet, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Unfortunately, he dies at one point, obviously, but like
Yeah, yeah.
before they get to sort of properly
Well,
in real life reignite
there's
their.
always flashbacks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, pre Bushy Run. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it like having two directors? Did you find that one took over from the other, or did they work in tandem for you? Because they would have spent a lot of time with you being the lead.
Yeah, totally. So they definitely worked in tandem, and they were, working with Dave and Larry was fantastic. And
Yeah,
they
yeah.
really know how to work with actors, which oftentimes, weirdly, directors don't sometimes know really how to direct
Okay.
actors. Um, so Dave, the way I saw it was that Dave was more hands-on with the characters in terms of the character work in like the small intimate scenes, it was Dave who was like giving us the small adjustments there.
Yeah.
Um, and then it was Larry who was more of a conductor of the big battle scenes and the bigger like overall moments, and making sure that I was playing those moments the way they wanted them to be seen in terms of when all the chaos is happening. Making sure like that I was on top of it, how they thought someone like Colonel Bouquet would be handling those moments. That was sort of where I felt Larry stepped in.
Yeah.
So they definitely worked in tandem, and yeah, I think it was just more of a they each had their own sort of different focus in the overall film. So yeah.
Now, you've worked on both indies and bigger budget productions, television and movies. Uh, how was it? Like, do you find restricted as an actor on an indie that you want to get it right the first time and you're aware of time limits, or do you just go through the same motions on every project?
Um, yes, you're aware of time limits, I think, and you're getting more done in a day than you would on something of a higher budget.
Yeah.
So it's definitely uh, something where you have to conserve your energy in order to keep up that, you know, performance level throughout.
Yeah.
The great thing about indie films is it does feel like you're all sort of in it together and mucking in to create something, as
Mm.
opposed to a bigger budget thing. It feels a bit more like everyone's doing their separate role and it's a polished machine that is working and you're fitting into that machine. And so there are benefits to both and things I enjoy about both. But yeah, the thing I love, and particularly about this movie, was there was a lot of camaraderie involved, which obviously was then mirrored, hopefully, in the camaraderie with my character and the troops and all of
It
that, of us
is.
all coming together to create something that we wanted to be great.
Yeah,
So
no, it is. It's conveyed to the screen. Like I said, it just punches above its weight. This film, and I was really impressed. Two reasons: what the scope is of this film for an indie project, and learning about this piece of history, which I had no idea about. Maybe there has been movies made about Bouquet before, but I was unaware of them.
I'm not aware of them either, and I don't think I could find anything in
No,
which he is the main character. And it's fascinating as well because this battle is such a turning point in the history of America as we know it today. So it's interesting that most people have never heard of it. So yeah, fascinating, and a fascinating character to learn about as well.
well, if I have my way, I'll tell everyone about it. I have been already, so I hope
Oh,
more
great, thank you.
eyes
Yeah,
get on it.
yes, that'd be great.
Now, being British and you're in LA, I'm talking to you, you're in LA at the moment.
Yeah.
How are you finding projects? Is the film industry, on a higher scale, or is it plateauing? Because, with the strike, everything seems to be back to normal, but is it? You're in the front lines.
I think it's gradually getting back to normal. Yeah, I think that was a big hit that it took last year with the double strikes. And then there's also now pending IATSE negotiation, or the negotiations are going on. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
So, I think it's gradually getting back to normal. I mean, it's funny because you're just constantly reading articles about how cinema is dead and all of that. But I feel like I've been
No.
reading cinema is dead for as long as I can remember. I think
Yeah.
it's definitely changing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But I certainly, I think there's always going to be people who want to watch movies, and an industry like this is going to always have ups and downs, and it's a tough industry as it is, and you just have to find a way to sort of weather the storm, I think, and try and stay positive. And I think it is a pretty robust industry because there's always going to be people always have a craving to see new stories.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. I think people want stories. They want something that they
Yeah.
haven't seen before. And there is, when it's a really great movie you watch, there is a sort of nourishing, for lack of a better word, aspect and feeling to it where you leave and you feel like you've experienced something new. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
think there's always going to be a desire for that experience, I think.
Yeah, and that's another reason I think I like Bushy Run so much is it's not a prequel or a sequel or a reboot or a remake, and
Yeah.
it's just different. You know, I like them too. Don't get me wrong; they're in another, obviously in another realm, but yeah, it's another reason I like Bushy Run just to have something else unique. And I watch a lot
Yeah.
of movies
Yeah, totally, totally.
for my
And yeah, I
for
think
my job. Now, what got you into acting, Tom? Like, were you always destined to be an actor and a performer from a young age, or did you just fall into it? Do you remember how it all started?
I do. So I've always been a big movie buff, and I remember it was my parents who, got me into movies. They love movies too. And I remember watching things like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and The Wizard of Oz and all of those films. Um,
That didn't scare you, the Willy Wonka, Gene Wilder?
Weirdly not. No, I never used to get scared by anything as a kid in movies ever. And The Wizard of Oz used to terrify my friends because of the Wicked Witch, and that
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
freak me at all. But when you're really young, you don't really have a concept of what it is that you're watching.
Mm.
But then as soon as I had an understanding that these were actors who people who like me who are paid to, dress up and do play these characters on screen, that was their job, then I was like, that's what I want to do. And so from a very young age, I was pretty driven to achieve that. And I did work professionally so from like the ages of 13 to 18. I worked on a BBC series called The Ambassador for 2 series.
Okay.
It was shot in Dublin, and the actress was Pauline Collins. She played the ambassador, and she was my mum in it.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, yeah. And then I did a movie after that, and then I finished what they call high school in America, and then I decided to take some time off and travel, get my degree. I went to university, and then by the end of university, I still was like, I still want to be an actor. And so I gradually started getting back into it, but it was really like starting from scratch then because I had some really good credits, but it was from when I was so much younger, and so I was kind of a different person at that point. And
Yeah.
then started getting back into it again, and then started kind of coming back and forth to LA, and then eventually found myself being based here in LA. So yeah.
Shirley Valentine played your mum, Pauline
Yeah,
Collins.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
I
It
love
did.
Pauline Collins. Like she
Yeah,
was that's a good way to start an acting career, having her as like a mentor or a scene partner.
absolutely. She was
Yeah,
amazing. And it wasn't
yeah,
just learning from her as an actor, but it was, I just learned from watching her and how she conducted herself on set. She was always on time, she was always prepared, she never complained, and was just extremely professional and kind to everyone around her. And so that's sort of like I learned that from her as well.
yeah.
And that's to me, I wasn't thinking, oh, this is an anomaly. I was thinking this is how you're supposed to be on set. So, yeah.
Well, it's worked because you've been very kind to me, so I appreciate it.
Yeah.
How did you fall into, like, I'll get to one of my favorite shows of all time in a second, but how did you fall into 90210 and Gilmore Girls? I mean, they're quite iconic, those two.
Yeah, yeah. So really, it's just from auditioning, like getting the auditions through my agents, and then that was pre self-tape. So I was going into the room and doing
Yeah.
that, and then getting cast that way. Uh, and yeah, it's just the luck of the draw that they happen to be these iconic big name shows. So yeah, but it was really just going into the room, auditioning, doing that. Yeah.
Do you miss that? Do you miss actually going physically into an audition room, or is it more intimidating? Like, do you think it's more of a benefit to be there in front of the casting director or a self-tape? Or is it not really make a difference?
I think there are pluses and minuses to both. I think that the in room you definitely have a bit more adrenaline going because you might only get one shot at doing it, and I sometimes feel that I in an audition context work a bit better with a bit of nerves.
Yeah.
And also the good thing about auditioning in room is that if they like what you're doing and they think you're right for it, they can give you direction and get you to do it again. Self-tape, you can do it as many times as you want, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, perfect it, or you know, try different things without the worry of someone saying we've seen enough. Um, but the issue is that you can't get in-room direction. So you know, if they wanted to see something else, you can't necessarily know that and take the direction and do it again. Having said that, one of the benefits of like everything being self-tape now is that you can be anywhere and do it. So you don't have to be locked in LA because you're worrying about missing opportunities. You can be in Japan and like put yourself on tape for something, and if you book it, you can come back. So that's another plus of it. But yeah, I do miss, you know, going into the rooms more and actually interacting with someone who's there and all of that. So yeah.
What do you like with accents? Are you confident being convincing with other accents, or do you sort of a bit wary about taking roles with those?
No, you know, I can definitely, you know, American accent I've got down, so I can do that. Most of my auditions are or a lot of my auditions are for American characters.
Yeah.
And I like to think I can do an Australian accent, but I'm not
I'd
going to do
like
it.
to hear it.
From years of watching
You don't have
Neighbours,
to do it.
years of watching Neighbours back in London.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, no. That leads me to saying, have you been down under? There's a lot of projects, a lot of movies, television series that actually internationally come down under to film. Have you been here to visit or to work before?
You know, unfortunately, I have not, and I'm dying to go. I have a very good friend who used to be based in LA, and she just moved back to Australia. She is Australian, and so now it gives me a good excuse to bite the bullet and get out to Australia, which I'm hoping to do sometime soon. Maybe I'll do it at some point at Christmas or something like that. I don't know, but I'm dying to come and visit. It's like one on my list for sure.
Can you surf?
I've tried surfing once, and I was quite good at it.
Oh, all right. So you've got
I'd like
balance.
to, yeah. I'm good at balancing, so I would definitely like to do more of that. Maybe that's what I'll do in Australia.
Cool. Well, where I'm right now, the beach is about 200 meters that way, Pacific
Oh
Ocean.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I'm close.
Really?
Now, to finish off, to wrap it up, I've got to ask about Lost. It's one of my all-time favorite shows. You appeared on it. Do you have any stories or memories? I've spoken to a few of the cast that were on the show, Matthew Fox included, and it seemed like it was an interesting show and behind the scenes to be on. What was your experience of the great show Lost?
Yeah, well, so I had an amazing experience on the show. It was interesting how I got that role because the sides they used to give out, I only auditioned this one time.
Right.
And the sides they gave out were what they call dummy sides. So they're not actual scenes from the show.
Yeah.
And you have no concept really of how in line they are going to be with the storyline or anything like that. And my audition scene I was like at college sitting outside the headmaster or the dean or whatever you call it, their office. I'd gotten in trouble for like plagiarism or something like that.
Oh,
And
what?
I was with this girl and we were basically talking about dobbing each other in and how we were going to be the ones who got away with it. I remember in the audition, they wanted me to be really aggressive, to the point where I was like, God, that seems a bit much for this scene, but that's what they wanted to see.
Yeah.
Anyway, I found out I booked it about a week later, and then they sent me the first script, and I was like, oh, wow, this is an amazing, really great role. And, you know, it had me sort of holding Sawyer up at gunpoint and threatening to chop off his head and stuff
I vaguely remember. I haven't
jungle.
revisited it, but I vaguely remember it. It must have been a
Yeah.
powerful moment for you.
Yeah. And so I was really excited. And obviously I was like, wow, this is totally different to what I had expected from the audition. But then the funny thing was, so in in the script, I'm referred to in that scene as British guy. And then I knew I was doing 2 episodes at that time, and I had no idea of how much or how little I was going to be in the second episode. And I assumed it would probably not be that much, maybe. I just
Mm,
didn't know. And so
mm.
they flew me out to Hawaii, and they said I was going to be there for something like 4 days or something like that. Um, and I remember thinking, oh, okay, so 4 days shoot, and I think it was to do both episodes. And I was like, yeah, okay, so I'm probably not going to be in the second episode very much. And then I got out there, and they handed me, when I got in the bus at the airport, they handed me the second script, and I started going through it, and I was like, damn, I'm in this a lot. And then my name changed twice in the
Oh, right.
script. So it went from British guy, it changed to Jones. And then, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't watched the show yet, but then it changed at the very end to revealing that I was the young Charles Widmore who was on the island. And so I
Yeah.
was like, wow, it's huge that this is a character who, uh, you know, is a huge part of the lore
Yeah.
of this show. But the hilarious thing was that production, for whatever reason, had thought, because of the different names the character had been given, that it was different actors. And
Oh.
I said to someone, are you really sure I'm only going to be here for 4 days? And they brought out the schedule and showed me, and they're like, yeah, this, and then we fly you home here. And I looked, and then I saw that Jones was listed, for more days, and then the young Charles Widmore for more days. And I was like, that's me. Like, I'm playing those two roles are all, it's all the same person. I'm playing those roles. And they were like, no, I don't think so. And I was like, yes, yes, I just read the script. And then they realized that I was right. And I don't know who was in charge of the scheduling, but they'd just gotten confused. And
Yeah.
then I was like, and they were like, oh yeah, you are right. You're here for, I think I was out there for about just under a month. And I packed for 4 days of being in Hawaii. And then it was like revealed that actually I was going to be there for 4 weeks. And obviously it was really exciting, but also I was like, I did not bring what I needed to bring for 4 weeks of being away from
Oh,
home.
no.
Thankfully, there was like a shopping mall across the street, and I just went there and bought a bunch of different stuff. But so it was funny. It was like, I was so kept in the dark through the whole thing, and it was just like reveal after reveal of how much I was going to be involved. But it was really exciting and such
Mm.
an amazing experience being on a show like that. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, being a young Alan Dale, who's an
Yeah.
Australian, he's an
Yeah.
Aussie, and Neighbours, and you already brought up
Yeah.
Neighbours. He was on
Yeah,
Neighbours.
exactly. I know. Yeah, and all my friends back home were like, I can't believe you're playing the young Jim Robinson.
No, and were you close to Josh? Like, did you have much to do with Josh? Because his Sawyer character was pivotal to the show as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. It was Josh and Elizabeth that I worked with
Yeah,
most on the show, and got along with them really, really well.
good.
And they were just lovely, really welcoming, really just made it a very comfortable, because it is kind of a surreal experience to go onto a show that's that famous and that
Oh,
you've watched so much of, and then suddenly you're standing there. It's a very like strange out of body experience at first, and they made me feel very welcome and made it feel very relaxed,
yeah.
And Terry as well. I had a couple of big scenes with him, and he was the same. Just really lovely and fun. And
He's on my bucket list, Terry O'Quinn. I'd love to sit down and interview him. He's done so many good movies and shows.
yeah, totally. And Nesta Carbonell as well. I did a bunch of stuff with him, and he
Yeah,
was great. He was great. Yeah.
Nesta, yeah. Well, there you go. That's amazing. Is that where you went for a surf in Hawaii and
It
did it?
was, yeah, in Hawaii. And
I
I
knew
think
it.
I spoke to my agent, I think the day after, my agent at the time, and she was like, "What did you get up to on your day off?" And I was like, "I went surfing." And there was this long pause. She was like, "You're insane." And I suddenly thought, "Oh, maybe that was stupid," because obviously, had I like broken a leg or something,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I could potentially have lost the job. So I won't do that again. But yeah,
No, no.
that is where I went surfing for the first time. Yeah.
Was it a secure set? Because it would have been very secretive, I'm assuming, on set filming Lost.
Yes, it was. I mean, they shoot a lot of night scenes out in the
Mm,
middle, like, well, what they create to be the middle of the jungle, but it is like at the entrance to a jungly area.
yeah.
So they're not really like a lot of passers-by, you know, when you're shooting that kind of stuff. And then the other stuff we shot sort of up, you know, in the valley of these kind of big mountainous areas. And again, so it's not like tourists are kind of, or anyone who lives on the island are swinging by
Mm,
and spotting us.
right. Yeah.
But I think they probably kept it from memory, like, you know, on the down low a little bit about what production was shooting and all
Of
of that.
course. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, mate. Well, you've been very generous with your time. I appreciate that. Now, to wrap it up, the final word on love, courage, and the Battle of Bushy Run. Can you, in your own words, why should people watch it? I mean, we've gone into detail, but there's a lot to choose from when it comes to streaming movies and selecting what to watch. In your own words, why should people choose the movie?
I would say people should choose it if they are looking for a really old school romantic epic, historical epic that will really transport you back in time. And not only will you learn something new about history, but it is just a really entertaining, exciting thrill ride of an action romance. And, you know, I think you won't be disappointed. So, yeah, that's my